Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about woke journalism, or really it's activists, paid and manufactured out in the backroom activists that are stuck out front to spread globalist propaganda and to narrow the discourse into only areas and subjects that the globalists approve of, and so on. And these people also, double up as managing to, or being set up to denounce any alternative opinions as the work of fascists and Nazis and white supremacists and so on. So I've just got a few examples that sort of annoyed me. It's irritating because they treat us with such contempt, these globalist propagandists. Now, I don't believe that everyone that you hear spouting the globalist nonsense is actually an activist themselves that's caught up in the ideology. Most will be, because that gives them the motivation. They're fighting back against Hitler, and also so they're so stupid enough to believe. But they're the sort of people they're using, I think, in some instances, if not quite a few, really don't know. They're too stupid to understand what they're talking about, and they just read the lines off. And they're people that would be, employed in very low-paid jobs, but because they're supporting and furthering the globalist project, they're paid much more money than they would in any real-world situation. So they kind of go along with it. And if you want to sort of buy people's loyalty, someone who's only worth $30,000 a year in the real world, you've paid them $130,000, and that buys a lot of loyalty. And you can remind them, if they get a bit entitled or something like that, you can always remind them that they can go back to the $30,000 a year if they really want to, and you can fix it for them unless they do what you want. So I think ideologues and fanatics certainly make up a lot of these propagandists, but also just hacks and goons that are kind of just on the bandwagon and doing as they're told, are also quite a few of those out there. But here's a few examples. Now, any propagandist will use any event to try and jump on that movement of information to insert their propaganda into the middle of it. So that's a time-honored tradition, and it's really at fever pitch these days. And any excuse to denounce Donald Trump, for example, no matter how unrelated Trump may be. So anyway, here's one. Now you wouldn't read about this. So here's a so-called talk show that actually does all right. I mean, they get 50. This is an online version I saw, but they get 50,000+ views. That could be bots, I guess, but they get 50,000 views per episode, which surprises me. I mean, I can't imagine anyone wanting to watch it. But look, so it's an American Jewish lesbian, academic, like a gender studies sociology academic, who's sort of anchoring the show, and they get a panel of so many people to discuss various issues. Now, this is where the deception comes in. Firstly, the program doesn't make clear its activist credentials, its activist purposes and intentions and so on. So that's a deception. Now, if they want to go and say, hey, we're a bunch of angry Jewish lesbians and we want to push propaganda in our worldview, and they put that out front, I don't mind. I mean, gee whiz, if somebody wants to watch that, it's their business. If they want to do the program with their money, that's also their business. But they're being government funded. Indirectly via an NGO that gets government grants, but government funded nonetheless. So it's the globalists are directing a Western government to say, hey, fund these guys. They make propaganda that we want put out there. So we want you to fund them. Would that channel exist without the funding? Of course not. Of course not. But it does, because it's funded by white taxpayers being paid to have hatred heaped upon them. So it's got the Jewish lesbian gender studies academic. They then only pick panelists who are very much on board with the ideological sort of view of the station. Now, again, I don't mind that, but they put them up as independent, so they make out that these panelists are all independent people who've arrived at particular views, and those particular views all happen to fully accord with the globalist agenda. Just coincidence, I'm sure. So they were talking about the death of or the passing of Queen Elizabeth in England, and so this was, of course, a golden opportunity to denounce white people, to denounce class, to denounce colonialism, to denounce slavery, to denounce. So it's a platform now for denouncing, having a good old go with all these ideological points that they love to push at every opportunity. So this was so the Queen's passing just provided a segue for these activists to have a good old go. Now, so they picked, I think it was four activists. There was not one white actor. There's not one white person, and not one male. So all brown, black, female. Now, all of them. One of them in particular is a rabid communist, and two socialists, and a gay, lesbian, trans rights, or I think it's a trans rights activist. So nobody there who's going to give an impartial, independent opinion. A couple of them I thought were rather restrained under the circumstances, but they were giving and they had leading questions. Do you think the death of the Queen will mean an end to the evil whiteness? Hitler, fascist Nazis. No, says the other person. No, England is an evil white fascist Nazi Hitler place. It's white supremacists are everywhere. Black people being oppressed. Trans rights, gay, lesbian rights, race right. Everything's bad. Everything's bad. The Queen typifies that. White people. Well, hopefully, white people will be in the absolute minority very soon, because that's the only way we can get rights. These damn fascist Nazis. And so on it went, and it just went from one speaker to the other. Either class was the issue. I mean, so one of the panels said that the royal family was wealthier than the poorest British people. I mean, and that was supposed to be, well, that just proves how fucking bad it all is. I mean, gee whiz. The Queen gets better medical care. Do you know? I mean, how's this? The Queen of Britain gets the United Kingdom. The Queen of the United Kingdom gets better medical care than some penniless third world peasant that arrives illegally on British shores. I mean, just contemplate some illegal third world peasant arrives in Britain and does not get the same quality of medical care on the second they arrive, the same quality of medical care as the Queen of the United Kingdom does. What a fucking outrage. That just demonstrates that there are Hitlers and Nazi fascists, white supremacists everywhere. And this was the level of the discourse. Now the anchor, of course, challenged nothing and challenged no one, no matter how absurd the proposition, no matter how absurd the allocation. Everything was accepted as being fact and written, and not even coming back and say, well, that's your opinion, so and so. Others would disagree, and it's a bit of a stretch to say. I mean, the president of the countries that these third world peasants came from was getting better medical care than the peasant was. Why isn't that an outrage? The head of the China and or any authoritarian regime that murders a lot of its people arbitrarily, they're getting better medical care. Why not point that out? I mean, why? But no, it's only white people, only white institutions that are bad, and that's all that was denounced. All white institutions and white people, white history was all denounced with I thought the rather gleeful support and encouragement of the anchor. So this is about the level of discourse. Now, there's another one. There was an African, I think he was president or prime minister of one of the African countries, and he'd agreed, I don't know why, but he'd agreed to be interviewed by a very leftist journalist. Now, the tone and manner of the journalist was that she was morally superior in every way. In every way. He was morally inferior in every way, and she was bringing him to book for his wickedness. And he's a black guy too, by the way, but bringing him to book for his wickedness. Now, his wickedness was as follows. He was male, so that's pretty wicked in itself. But in his country, homosexuality and trans is illegal. So nor will they pay for people to, have trans operations or transition from one gender to another, that sort of thing. So now this is the law in that country, and now whether I agree with the laws in other countries or not, or think it's a good thing, or would I make that law if I was the president or something, then, or a legislator, then maybe not. But it's not my business to lecture others on what their morals should and shouldn't be, nor do I see it the right of anyone to really do that, as long as I'm not directly affected. Then it's not my business. Only when I'm directly affected, that does make it my business, in as much as it might harm me. But if it's something I'd simply disagree with or would not do myself, and it's in another country, a sovereign country with their own elected representatives, then it's up to those representatives and those people to make the determination as to what is or isn't desirable or acceptable or legal in the case of passing legislation. But the journalist, and I'll talk a little bit about her in just a minute, took the view that she was the moral superior talking to a moral inferior, and he better explain why. Because damn moral inferior that he was, the damn moral superior that she was, he better explain it. He better explain it good. Otherwise, he's going to be in trouble. He might get a real finger wagging from this moral superior woman. Now, let's have a look at the journalist. She's one of these globalist journalists that's manufactured out in the back room. She doesn't seem very bright, reasonably well spoken, I suppose, but doesn't seem very bright. Definitely ideological, and definitely caught up in the ideology of her way is right, everyone else is wrong. Therefore, she can hector them, give them harsh questioning, talk to them like they're shit, because she's the morally superior one and they're the morally inferior one. Not only are they morally inferior, but they're just plain fucking evil, and which means they don't have any rights, nor should she even be pleasant or polite to them. Doesn't have to be, because they're fucking evil. And when evil people not only don't deserve to be spoken to politely, and not only do you have to make an effort to understand their point of view, but they're all fucking Nazis. They don't even deserve legal rights. So you can do whatever you want to them, and she's one of those. So she was from a Jewish background, and she's not a lesbian. But did the sociology sort of round through the universities. Now, she obviously was spotted by the globalist talent spotters as someone who's going to be useful to them further on down the track. And like, football teams have talent scouts out looking at the college footballers and that sort of thing. I think in university there's, in universities there are scouts looking for the sort of people that they can use later on in various ideological capacities, whether it's journalists or politicians. The World Economic Forum does this, and you've got, and that intellect obviously isn't a requirement for this. It's just usefulness to the globalist project. So you get people like Chrystia Freeland, morons like Justin Trudeau in Canada, those two, Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, who's a fucking moron. And the list goes on of these people that they pick at an early age, which could be socialists. They could be in some sort of other, capitalist form. It doesn't matter. The sole sort of thought is, will they be useful to the globalist project? And if yes, then they seek to control them, compromise them, do whatever, just so they then become available as good globalist foot soldiers. And this woman is one of those. She was spotted, I believe, she was spotted in one of the universities in the sociology department. So she isn't like she's doing some high-powered heavyweight course. Folks have got enough money where she doesn't have to worry about student loans, debts. And then she gets the, you just see the pattern again and again. You see the pattern. She graduates with the highest honours available. She gets president of the student body and editor of the student magazine. Without any abilities or achievements that would lead her to that. So again, that's been arranged, organised to give her that profile of some high-powered success story. And again, the honours degree, which she wouldn't have got. She's not bright enough to get that. I doubt she's bright. She probably could have got a sociology degree. After all, who fails those? So then she comes out and gets a pretty plum job straight away. Book publishing contract again, building that profile. So gives someone lots and lots of cred. And so when they're pushed into the spotlight or the public eye as a globalist, propagandist thinks, well, look at this person's achievements. Book publishing, president of the union, summa cum laude, magna cum laude. Oh, wow. I mean, this person is a fucking genius. And of course, they're pro-globalization. So shouldn't you be as well? So she then marries a Jewish propagandist who was working in the Obama campaign and during the Obama presidency. So and then she starts to get these very well-paid, very prestigious jobs around the place. And again, her role is to push globalization or the social division and so on. Any nation or area around the world that doesn't go along with globalization, which is social division, racial division, and division based on sexual proclivity, and doesn't allow the NGOs to run riot around the place, stirring up trouble and agitating and those sort of things, then those countries are obviously accused of being fascists and Nazis and so on and so forth, unenlightened or whatever you want to call it. But because they won't allow that, or they resist it or minimize it, then they're much less susceptible to the globalist takeover. And that's why they're condemned, and that's why these attack dogs masquerading as journalists are sent out to go after them. But again, I don't mind if journalists or people purporting to be journalists have those views. You have any view you want, I don't care. But be upfront about it. In my view, this journalist is an activist. This journalist has activist associations, activist husband or wife, activist whatever, and has been created and manufactured out in the backroom factory by the globalist machine. And now here are their views. That's okay with me. I don't care. But to try and put themselves up as independent and reasonable and holding power to account, then they're clearly not. Any pro-globalist World Economic Forum goon is never held to account by this journalist, and never gets a good questioning. Anyone who isn't totally on board with globalization, they get treated like shit. But that's just how it is. So, and there are many other examples I could go through, but those are just a couple. But whenever you see these journalists, go online. It'll just take a few minutes. Get their name and go online. Go online to the panelists, and you'll see just how heavily weighted it is towards the pro-globalization message. And from that, you can extrapolate just how much propaganda you see every day, and you're seeing a lot. All of it's pro-globalist. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.